Sarah Turnbull, welcome to Booktopia.
Thanks, Caroline.
What was it like sitting down to write your second book after Almost French?
A number of years went by actually before I started writing this book. And in fact, the story of my second book is something that I talk about in All Good Things because it was a struggle. This book was originally supposed to be a book about travelling around Australia, and suffice to say there are 23 chapters in All Good Things, plus an epilogue, and I get to Australia now and our travels in chapter 23. So really the book about Australia is not about going around Australia.
So nothing has gone to plan, but I wondered about the sort of aftermath in a way of Almost French from Frédéric's point of view, your French husband, because I was thinking about how in Elizabeth Gilbert's case, when she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, she was suddenly bringing a person who never wanted to be exposed to any kind of publicity or public awareness into the limelight, and her husband's very shy and very sort of low-key. How did Frédéric feel about the fact that suddenly through Almost French he became a known quantity?
Funnily enough, I'm the reluctant one, which I know I know sounds odd because I'm the one writing the books, but he feels fine about it. He's completely relaxed. I'm the one that stresses and worries, you know, about putting ourselves in and putting other people in, because it's not just ourselves, but sometimes friends. And he, particularly with All Good Things, really encouraged me. He sort of says now, well, you've ended up writing a book that I knew you had to write, and it just took you so long because you were fighting it, because I didn't want to write another personal book, or I thought I didn't want to write another personal book, and so I did fight this book. I've heard it said that, you know, it's the book that you fight the most that you most need to write.
So because of Frédéric's work, you get to move to Tahiti, and what I think is so interesting about this book, All Good Things, is the way you explore the notion that we all have a private kind of definition, a private idea of paradise, but that idea so often is built around an island, and that Tahiti would have to be the ultimate.
Whenever you make a big move in life, you go with your little bag of dreams, and we went to Tahiti with our little bag of dreams, and I went there with two clear goals that I didn't really talk about at the time, except with Fred, but and that was, I was going to write a novel in those 2 years, and I was going to have a baby, have a child. And those two themes, I guess if I was to describe the book, I would say the theme of creativity runs through it. Creativity in the ultimate sense of creating a child, and also creativity in terms of writing a book, a first novel, and then I also talk about there's an art theme, I think, that is tied up with that, and Matisse, and I talk about why his visit to Tahiti, which is lesser known than Gauguin's, obviously many years in Tahiti, why that resonated with me so much.
Well, that for me is one of the real pleasures of this book, Sarah. I have to congratulate you on this. I love the fact that you push Gauguin, whom we know so much about, and again presents us with a kind of cliche about Tahiti, into the background, and you bring Matisse and his relationship to Tahiti into the light. So tell us a little bit about that.
One day in Papeete, when I was browsing through a bookshop there, and I came across a little book which was about Matisse's voyage to French Polynesia, and I didn't even know that at that stage that he'd visited. He only stayed 3 months. He didn't produce any paintings from that trip. But one of the reasons it really resonated, the more I read about it, the reason his trip resonated with me, was that he went to an atoll called Fakarava, and where he just fell in love with and was fascinated by the colours and the light in the lagoon. And there were these wonderful descriptions of Matisse sort of just spending whole days in the lagoon, and he was 60 at the time, so he was, for the time, he was an elderly man, and there he was in the lagoon with these sort of island-fashioned swimming goggles on, and just peering up from the bottom through the surface at the clouds, and then looking down through the surface at his own hand and the clarity and the colours, and then of course the fish and the sea life. It's just magnificent there. So we went to Whakarava 4 or 5 times during several years there, and every time I thought of Matisse. And probably one of the most amazing experiences we had there was on Whakarava, in an ocean pass when we were diving, and it was everything that Matisse described. It was the colours, the light, the incredible sea life being pumped through this narrow ocean channel. And so I suppose his trip really resonated because he was describing things that I just found incredibly beautiful, and in the end that I wanted to describe in words.
Now, of course, the other big theme, as you said, is this business of wanting to become a mother, which for you was not an easy path at all.
No.
Was that difficult to write about the process of going through IVF, the disappointments?
It was. Look, I think there's a line somewhere in the book which might seem ironic to read, is where I say I'm actually quite a private person. So, and it's quite true. I'm sure I've got dear friends who'll read this book and I'll think, oh, I didn't know that, because so it was hard. Again, coming back to Fred, he was really instrumental in that.
Did you think of going to see any traditional healers and sort of buying into the kind of alternative medicine?
I did it all.
Did you?
Oh, yes. I had crystals waved in front of me and, yes, needles stuck into me.
But were there traditional Tahitian things about fertility? For example, every culture seems to have those things.
Well, I didn't see a traditional healer in Tahiti, but I did feel somehow that there we were in this extraordinary, beautiful, fertile environment with these incredible mountains all around us. There was one mountain just behind our house which has a little eye hole through the top, and I always felt that Muaputa the mountain was watching over us somehow, and I thought, well, if I'm going to fall pregnant, it's more likely to be in Tahiti than or Moorea, actually, because we lived not on Tahiti but on the neighbouring island, Moorea, which is very beautiful geographically.
Now, in a complete sort of role reversal situation, you've ended up back here in Australia. So Frédéric is now the outsider who's having to sort of navigate his way. You've come back to Australia. Ironically, your parents have ended up moving to France and retiring there. How has that return to Australia been for you now as a mother and with Frédéric in tow?
Even, for him, just discovering Sydney in winter was something, different. He kept sort of going on, why aren't the houses properly heated?
Good question.
He still hasn't sort of, so look, it was great. It was really great. It has been great, and like any new beginning somewhere, it's been a little bit tough as well.
Apart from the heating, and I completely agree with him about that, is there anything where you've sort of had a little quiet smile to yourself where you've noticed that he's found something difficult, the way when you first got to Paris, so many things struck you as peculiar?
Yes. Well, he thinks, yes, he definitely questions the reputation for Australians being easygoing. He thinks we are on one level. But he said he's never seen, people get so worked up about little rules and regulations as he has in Australia. He calls us the Swiss of the Pacific, and because he just feels that we are very governed by small rules and regulations, and we do like to adhere to those. And if you park in a place where you're not supposed to park, or you do something that you're not supposed to do, you can get into all sorts of trouble. There was one incident, and I talk about this, I think, in my book, where we were back in Australia. It was before actually we moved here, but we were back. He was dropping me at a ferry stop. I left my wallet or something in the car, and so he left the car running and ran after me to give me my wallet. And a bus pulled in at that point and he was blocking its turning circle.
Terrible.
The bus driver went, you know, he just really was livid and swearing. And I said to Fred, well, you better go and run and say sorry. And he looked at me and said, I'm too scared. The bus driver was just red with rage. So little things like that, you know, of course in Paris that would just be, you know, a very everyday incident. Whereas he finds that we get quite worked up about those.
Well, I love the idea that we are the Swiss of the Pacific.
Yes.
I'm going to remember that one.
The other thing that I've heard a lot from Europeans is that we're very ready and willing to say, you must come over for dinner. But that actually often the invitations aren't forthcoming, and which is quite the opposite in France.
Yes, the French never invite you to dinner.
They never, but if they do, you know, when they finally do, it's a real invitation. You know, it's not we must get together. It's a proper invitation.
Thank you very much, Sarah Turnbull.
Thanks, Caroline.